So good evening. I'm Dayvon love. Everybody here is deep on support subject. I'll say a little bit about yes. I'll use a extinction. We engage in political advocacy, specifically and engaging with other volunteers. In this topic, part of this topic is kind of a combination of conversation I had with Cleo. In addition to just a larger concept, to think about some of the things we see in the media, some of the conversations I choose to discuss, some of the challenges that things are happening in this concept. We get good at how to advocate for conversation with people that have the right perspective. That's going to be useful. That's the kind of advocate. So that's really what brought us together. So again, we're going to take on our thing, which is actually study name, organization, and I was talking about the introduction and so you can introduce yourself to
Hey everybody, peace and blessings. Sadiq Ali, representing this evening Baltimore Rites of Passage initiative, all about African Centered Rites of Passage experiences for young Black men and boys in Baltimore City. Peace and blessings.
Good evening, my name is Manago. I'm with the Black People to the Black Mens Xchange, Rites in Maryland, and Rites.
Good evening. I'm Amanda Morgan. I am a licensed clinical social worker and social work professor here representing the Association of Black Social Workers.
Good evening, everyone. My name is Tiera. I'm an attorney with the Office of the Defender. I'm specifically a juvenile attorney dealing with kids in delinquency court and kids.
So with that, so let me just give some general remarks. When we talk about the history of our community and its relationships to children and families, there was a time when Black youth were socialized by institutions that were run by and controlled by Black people. When we think about the phenomenon of desegregation, one of the things that happened is the decimation of many of those Black institutions, whether they're Black schools, Black civic institutions, the decimation of those institutions, and what it was filled in with were the human social service sector, the expansion, right, of the nonprofit and human social service sector in its role in socializing young people. And part of the narrative, we think about particularly the 70s and 80s, right, that the war on drugs, which a big part of how it was propagated, were narratives of Black pathology, kind of pathologizing Black families and Black people, that created a context where white folks in general, in this society broader, saw itself as saving Black kids from their families. And this created a context where many of the interventions that are often developed as it relates to dealing with young people are either institutions outside of our community again seeking to save our children, or the criminal juvenile justice system being weaponized against them. Additionally, the kind of punishment-centric threats of the criminal justice system has harmed our communities in ways that I think have become more mainstream. I think there's more people that understand and talk about mass incarceration, prison industrial complex, but there are particularities to how those systems impact our community that still need some demystification. So those of us who oppose policies that enhance the criminalization of Black people are not saying that we don't care about community violence. And I would argue that much of the media that we're seeing and a lot of those that are advocating for more law enforcement-centric approaches to dealing with issues that face our community would have you believe that those of us that push back against the criminalization of our young people don't care about public safety, don't care about violence in the community. What we're actually saying is that we want to advocate for and increase opportunities for diversion from the system. And furthermore, Black people are caught in situations that should not require punitive consequences. There should be the opportunities for the community, for parents, for teachers, to make the best determination as to what's best for the young person. So, for example, if you have a young person that comes to school with a gun, right? There are political points that folks are trying to score that would make someone believe that just because they have a gun in school, they should. And given that context, parenting is extremely tough in this environment, having to navigate that. Having to navigate education, whether it's the Department of Social Services, whether it's the Department of Juvenile Services. There have been many institutions that have failed our communities, and it's put parents in a situation where if they're having trouble dealing with young people, right, there aren't very many resources that are maybe most available in terms of how to deal. And also given the environment, given the system of white supremacy, there's a way that the ways that the system wants young people to be dealt with cumulatively, there's ways that we internalize that, right? Within some contexts, our community becomes some of the biggest cheerleaders for some of the most vicious and punitive interventions when it comes to young people. So what we want to do this evening on this panel is we want to explore how parents can navigate these challenges, ways that parents can combat the internalization of this white supremacist, punitive, centric approach to dealing with young people. How parents can protect you from these policies that advance the criminalization, and what policies to support to protect children and families from those larger dynamics. So that's what we hope to do on the panel this evening. So what we're going to do is each panelist has a question posed to them. I want to give them enough time to really develop their argument and develop the respect that it provides. And then, I'm just going to invite the audience to really be engaged in the conversation. So that's how we're going to proceed. So with that, I'm going to actually start here right directly to my left, Sadiq, who mentioned his affiliation tonight as one of the co-leads of the Baltimore Rites of Passage Initiative. So if you can talk a little bit about what the African Center for Rites of Passage is, talk a little bit about its history, and talk about how it can be used to support parents, given all the dynamics that I talked about.
Awesome, again, peace and blessings. Great to see everybody both here in person as well as tuning in online. Just a bit of context setting before we jump in. It's my honor to lead off. The first thing I want to do is acknowledge my tribe back at home, right? My wife, my partner, Shanna, who's there dealing with our 7-year-old. She wanted to be here this evening, but that's part of the give and take parenting. Which sort of leads me to like my first big point is that sort of step zero before we even get to some of the parenting conversation is that the selection of your mate who you co-create with and create children is like a critical decision, one that I don't want to get lost in this conversation. It's like we got to start way upstream, first and foremost. The second thing that I want to lift is, before we sort of walk into this idea of rites of passage as a setting, as a cure, I wanted to share a concept that some of us tuning in and some of us here this evening might be familiar with. As is the case in all things that happen here in America, it's all under the shadow of white supremacy and sort of capitalist culture. And us having to unlearn a bunch of this just toxic, just awfulness that we are indoctrinated with on a day-to-day basis as Black folks in this country. And it's the concept of decolonizing your parenting, which is right on that spectrum, leading to liberated parenting. So there's a sister who's done some really, really extensive work in the field of decolonized parenting. Her name is Yolanda Williams. She has a podcast. You can go online, get her resources, like really dope sister. Shout out to my big brother Lamar Shields. Told me to shout him out. He's the one who actually put me on with the sister Yolanda as well. But one of the things that she talks about in terms of decolonizing parenting, first and foremost, is we have to sort of get rid of all these vestiges of enslavement and all these bad habits that we carry over to many aspects of our lives, including parenting. But one of which we already know where we're going with this is the vestiges of beating our kids, spanking our kids, right? Putting our hands on our kids. One of my big homies recently told me how something sort of switched to him. He heard this like little panic, dude, I laid off this entire time. Somebody essentially told him like, yo, you're not smarter than a 5-year-old? That the 5-year-old, this beat a 5-year-old? And he said it just blew him away. That very, very simple. But the whole point though is that corporal punishment, beating our kids, whipping our kids, whooping our kids, whatever we want to call it, is a direct message of shadow enslavement in this country. That's sort of point one. There's a bunch of others. I won't get too long-winded, just save some ammo, but I want y'all to really chew on this idea of decolonized parenting and liberated parenting. There's another book I would recommend by a sister who's actually local, Sister Stacey Patton, who wrote the book Spare the Kid, right? Why the Whooping Won't Save Black America, which obviously is a play of the old saying, I don't want to say biblical, but like, spare the rod, spoil the child, right? Meaning like beat your kids so they don't become spoiled. The last thing I'll say really quickly in terms of rites of passage, to the core of the Dayvon's question, why is something as critical as rites of passage important for parents? So quick example, this idea of village, right? The village has like, right? Oh, it takes a village, I think all of us are on the same page. But I want to update that paradigm for us a little bit for 2024. We know the village is a thing, but also some of y'all saw Uncle T's comments, right? He was up there with Bear Scott. Sometimes the village is messed up. But this idea that really want to update this paradigm is around this concept, like crowdsourcing. We got to crowdsource our parenting in the same way that we do on TikTok. When we're looking for a new mac and cheese recipe, we crowdsource the best recipes. We're looking for where to vacation, we going to Jamaica Day, bro. We're like, hey, what's the best? We crowdsource the knowledge. We do that for all of this. I just contributed, the rest is also revolution, but we do this for far less important things than parenting. So the idea updated for 2024 is rites of passage in community parenting. These are along the lines of crowdsourcing parenting to get the best stuff, to get everybody in the game. And so to Dayvon's point, rites of passage experiences are all about cultivating and socializing Black folks for us by us in our own system. That's what rites of passage is. This is a multi-thousand-year-old system that gets the community in the driver's seat for socializing norms of behavior. It gets the community in the driver's seat in terms of establishing the foundation for what community accountability looks like. Not the police, not the school system, not the judicial system. We as the community, via rites of passage and other interventions, are all about establishing us as what goes in the community, not an external force. And then lastly, rites of passage also lays out a foundation for ongoing support, because you can't have accountability and consequences without support and a culture to actually ensure that those survive, so on and so forth. So rites of passage is one of many sort of cultural institutions that do our work at Baltimore Rites of Passage Initiative. We are looking to revive and to grow and scale.
Can you just in a moment when we talk about what exactly is African rights, the African Center rights of passage, people who don't know? Would you know?
Thank you for that, brother. I'm speaking super high level. Rites of passage is a sort of broad category of experiences that take prepubescent boys/young men, take them through a process of learning, growth, and development, and at the end of a set period of time, prepare these young boys or young men for manhood. It is a process that is led by men from the community, including that child's own father, that again is has a beginning, middle, and end of the process. I also want, in the larger context of Dayvon's question, every period of life is a rite of passage. There are birth rights, there are transitional rights from manhood, from boy to man, from girl to woman. There are ancestor rights, there are death rights. There are elder rights and there are death rights. So every period, there is an African-centered paradigm and framework to help guide and help inform and cultivate what the proper sort of community response and responsibility is at each one of those stages. So birth, boy to man, elder, ancestor, so on.
So, Cleo, in line with what Sadiq is talking about as it relates to establishing norms that are important in raising and socializing young people, we're in a society where there are these anti-Black notions that impact the way that parents relate to children. So what are some of the ways that some of the things that parents can do to combat that program? So if we can talk actually about what that program is, and then talk about, how parents combat that.
Sure. Good afternoon again. Evening. Just for a moment, inspired what the brother just said about Black Mens Xchange recipe. Remember saying that? And how people go on the internet wherever to find the recipe. But also because people, no matter what state they're in, often know the difference between nasty macaroni and cheese and good macaroni and cheese. And they want the good macaroni and cheese. But white supremacy, mythology, culture, sometimes we don't even know something is nasty. That's the culture. That's the thing. We don't go looking like it. We think what we have is what we got. For example, how many of you heard somebody who loves you say, baby, you gotta go twice with the white man to make sure that you do well in society? Who's heard of it? Well, somebody thinking, somebody who typically loves you, they should assume that the rest of you, which is what that is, it's must be good. Big mama, little mama, like whatever mama is these days. Say, well, there's an implication in that message. Well, that's the intention. The implication is you're twice as bad, so you got to make up for that. Because we don't tell the whole story. We don't say you have to work twice as hard as black people be tripping. They got issues, they have inferiority complexes, because and they get to run things that because they have issues. We have to explain the story complete instead of just saying you got to work twice as hard as black people, and that's it. So I say that because a lot of what occurs, what becomes social notions, societal notions, as they're going to ask you to address, is a result of unresolved, unaddressed traditions that become norms, more like people that need to be deconstructed and that normalized. We have to be lovingly honest with our kids, but preferably there are solutions to this. You embody the solutions. I'm a little bit older than you now. I think we're on solutions, but you got more common with solutions, baby. I love you. So what I'm here to tell you, gotta be like this, particularly with mine. You gotta encourage our children all the time because that's something we apply. They're always trust me. And some of this you already know about. There are perpetual implications that something's wrong with being black. Perpetual implications of the media that even loving black people is like go to white folks. And if you watch TV, which most of our children are, black people are considered one of the highest number of TV watchers and media engagers in this country. Right now, you have to get a magnifying glass out and a telescope to find two black people loving each other somewhere in this. But they love the white folks, and of course, white folks love the white folks. A lack of lovingly engaging a child and saying, that's problematic, baby. I love you. It's messy because they got an issue. Before they had an issue, I didn't told you. You got to find nice. But my point is saying that you have to constantly alert them which does not mean they're not going to have to deal with the problem. There's a larger group that has a problem that right now is learning stuff. That perpetually does all kinds of things to keep us asleep at the wheel. And that's why it's important to talk about intentional black parenting. Because we can't afford passive, residual, surface black parenting. We have to be real intentional. This is a child. I'm going to make sure they love themselves and that they navigate through society in ways that don't make them question their worth. That's an active decision. They don't happen by chance. And it's an active and considerate strategy. I want to talk about this for a moment on a macro basis in terms of the field of mental health and culture anthropology that I did. And this is a story that I think Dayvon have heard before, but I think it helps make the point. Stories like this I've been doing work for 50 years. There was a young man in our community named Donovan Jackson that was with his, in Inglewood, California, who was with his father, driving down the street, and the cops pulled them over, as they did all the time, and do all the time. And they were, to make a long story short, roughing up his father and messing with his father. Donovan was like 14, he was one of these small frame kids who looked like he might have been 9, really small. He said, "Leave my daddy alone." And they reached into the car. They pulled him out of the car and slammed him on the cops. Black people want to be white, do the same thing. But these white cops put his baby on the front of the car and they handcuffed him. And it was all on tape. Get to the point. And it was, media, blah, blah, blah. There was a festival downtown at the LA Coliseum called the Black Mens Xchange, full of black folks. I was one of the speakers. And he had jumbotrons all over the place because there's so many people there. And when he got on the stage to speak, he was up suddenly on a big old jumbotron. Well, I had that in this picture. It was me. I had a 8x11 black and white picture of Donovan because I worked in Inglewood. And I put before I even started talking, this picture up, this picture is also huge up on the jumbotron. I didn't say nothing. In this room that was busy and buzzing and talking, he was getting quiet. And I said, who was this? I said, before you say anything, I would like for the first person to say anything to be a younger person. So who is this? And a young male voice in the back, couldn't see him well, said, Donovan Jackson. And I said, what happened to Donovan Jackson? And they knew they had to put him on a loop, all week. So I asked parents, which I do all the time when I'm talking to children, and their parents are in the room, I said, can I ask your children a question? And this was about, I don't know, 10 minutes into my talk, so they kind of, my vibe, and kind of trust me, yes. I said, can I ask your children a question? You don't like the question, you can shut it down. And tell them, no, we're not doing that. But I want to ask the children a question. And they said, okay. I said, how many of you was taken to the side by your parent and they checked you and they said, baby, how you doing? What is your perspective of that incident? Because the first thing I asked you, which I forgot to mention in my story here, is who knew who he was. And almost everybody raised their hands, including the kids. Like I said, it was on the loop TV all week. So I said, how many of you, your parents took you to the side and asked you how you felt about that? They look at their parents like, should I lie? I'm now looking at them, but they, bottom line, and I'm talking about reams of black folks in this place. The majority of children, their parents didn't say anything, they didn't check in. And guess who started crying? And this happens all over the country, and I do different scenarios for similar stories. Unfortunately, it's always a story when Dylan Roof murdered a bunch of black folks. I did a civil exercise at a mental health conference in St. Paul. But anyway, guess who started tearing up and crying in the room? Boys. Let me get to the point because the time it was little boys. Donna was a boy. The dude about Rodney King, the whole list of black assaults, but they never had a chance to talk. They got a curriculum, though, man. You got a black man, so you can do well in society. The implication, the loving implication that something's wrong with you, and the proof that something's wrong with you by all this murders, beating up, getting killed by the cops, and there's no conversation. And the parents do not talk because they don't love them. That's not the issue. And it gets back to some what he mentioned in terms of like passage. But I try to address it from another place, which affirms that. But I talk about the macaroni and cheese because people go to look for what they know. They don't go to look for rites of passage. They come in and start writing the passage. You know what I'm saying? If they hear it all, that's not a part of their norm package. Mac and cheese is part of the norm in that curriculum. Be twice as good as part of the norm. But I attempt to deconstruct anti-black toxic generational norms for us to either erase or tell the whole story. Because all this stuff goes back to the impact of living in the presence of a violent and abuser, an insecure phenomenon that is just a potential threat because they've been threatening you and they're worried about you getting back. It's all this stuff that keeps going on. I mean, for example, in the modern world where we live now, up to 18 states have legalized either Black history or so-called DEI or the equivalent of critical race theory in schools. Or 19 states now. And in our face, while our children are not being informed or being asked to be allowed to talk about, oh, you saw it, right? What do you think, baby? They're just getting the curriculum. You gotta be twice as good as the white man, but not given permission to breathe, actually acknowledge what's occurring, and have respect. Which implies that this perspective doesn't matter, and that the people who are messing with the 18 states are maybe they're right. Especially if you think that you are an N-word. Y'all know what the N-word is. If that mantra is more perpetual than critical then that monster runs things. And it interrupts the capacity to wonder about life, or even ponder that stuff like that is even important. Because I have conversations with young people all the time. I have lunch in my office, and they're not talking about rites of passage. They're talking about it kind of now that they start with me, but they really are not that crazy about Black. And I don't mean straight up that they have hatred. That's another way of putting things. They don't even know how to have a affirming, healthy conversation about being Black. Don't even know how. And well, I'm gonna close with this because this is so important. We need to have conversation. We need to engage each other and engage our children, and not assume that curriculum is enough. Be quite as good as the white man. It's not even remotely enough. And we have to, as the guardians, we have to humanize. And when I'll close with this, we'll talk later. Whenever the new trauma comes, because it's coming, somebody being killed, an important person who had a position of power, like Mary Mosby, you can almost put it here. Because all these things that be a reassault. Stop thinking, get an education, you're gonna be all right. That's your code now. Talk to your baby. Some of them are probably 30 years old now. Whatever. Say, how you doing? How you doing? How do you feel about that? And talk about it. But there should be an agenda. I don't have an agenda. You should have an agenda too. Get them to that being Black. That's just no rhetorical questions really run off the mouth. I have an agenda. I want them to think about being Black. I want them to know that it's not without purpose. We have with issues in our community too, but there's a larger context that exacerbates issues. And we have to be honest about that. Instead of thinking, which I'll tell another story about that later, maybe, but thinking that if we don't talk about it, it won't hurt. That's like saying, I don't tell them to quit saying, when they walk to it, they're gonna fly over it. They're gonna go right. They're gonna go right in the sand if I don't tell them. We gotta tell them about it. That's it.
All right. So Amanda, I know, your work as a social worker. I know you've engaged a lot of the systems, whether it's DSS and other systems that deal with young people. What is some supports that exist for parents who are concerned about their children, whether it's, victims or perpetuators of violence, or just in general, like just general resources there are for parents? And what are some things that folks should know in terms of how to navigate some of these systems that technically are tasked with dealing with children and families?
Yes, so first, before I say anything, I need to acknowledge that the profession of social work is complicit in Black harm. Let's be clear. I am a social worker, but I understand how this system has perpetuated harm against us and have been anti. So that's first. That's not the perspective I'm coming from, but we have to acknowledge that because the system that parents have to, out of necessity, whether it's juvenile justice or child welfare or foster care, or even just the welfare system in terms of income maintenance and assistance, are absolutely steeped in white supremacy, have never been intended for us, and have done harm historically. So let's put that on the table first. That's important. This is a good alley-oop. Thank you, because you said a lot of things that were already on my mind about parents and being supportive. I think Sadiq started with the unlearn word, and I think that ultimately we all want our children to be safe, right? We want our children to be able to walk, our young people to walk in the street and nothing happens to them. We do not want them to fall into the wrong crowd. We don't want them to be in areas or with folks that are, we all these things, right? We have a good intention, like you talked about, the intention is there. And I think, one, we have to ground ourselves in the reality of safety. America is a safe place. We exist in a society that is culturally violent. And I think because we all have, as Black people, endured historical measures of trauma generationally, that sometimes we take our eye off of that because we're existing in this system. And so my encouragement for parents in alignment with communication and relationship, because that's also what I heard and agree with, the relationship that you're building with your young people is also saying, let's be real and honest. This place we live in is not safe for any of us. So, and I'm going to get to your question about support, but I think this is important because how we support our young people starts with that, starts at home, and starts with exactly what you said, that relational piece. How, and the question that I often ask parents, have they asked their young people, is what would make you feel as safe as possible? Tell me what I could do to make you as safe as possible, feel safe as possible. Because safety is really perception, honestly. We don't ask people that. We don't ask young people that. And I had a therapy practice, and most of my clients were teenagers, Black teenagers. And parents brought them to me, say, please fix this boy, because listen, I need him to live beyond tomorrow. Do something with this girl. Like, this was the overwhelming conversation, right? And it's like, well, one, there's nothing wrong with them. So we're going to shift our language away from fix, right? That is playing into what we've been taught from this system, that something is pathologically wrong with us. The system is why they age our children, right? You know, they age our children as if, you know, they treat them like they're 25 when they're 12, right? They do that because, you know, they don't see us, our children, as human beings, and they ignore completely what child development is. This is a child, and his brain is literally not fully developed until 25. And so I think when it comes to support, it's having those conversations first at home about what safety is, having the reality, talking about the reality of that, humanizing and treating your children like they are human beings and not this thing I have to manage and control. That is a vestige of slavery, that I have to control my kid. Something that I teach parenting, and I say, you know, from 0 to 13, you are managing this whole kid's life. You got to feed them. They can't do anything without you, and they increasingly get some skills, right? 13, they become adolescents, and in that range, that 13 to what some would say 18, some would say 21, some would say 25, right? So that you are gradually starting to guide. You're guiding, not managing, because they need to understand what this looks like. They need to understand the realities of life. They need to understand how to navigate relationships, how to navigate conflict, how to navigate things, right? And so we help them guide. We're not controlling, because you can't do that. That 17-year-old is going to wander the earth by himself without you, because he has to, right? He's not going to always have you. So that guidance is what he's going to rely on. Those conversations are what he or she is going to rely on when they're in the street. This is the support that parents can give, that have to start with and ground. It's really about how can I have safety. So we are African people, whether personally, you know, we're all on spectrums of our connection to that. But we cannot be in denial that our ancestors were brought here from that continent. So we are African descended people, and we have everything that we need in our DNA. It is there. We have, you know, the terminology that I hear all the time. We have ancestral technology. We have the ancestral wisdom. You know, it's why, you know, my grandmother would say things, oh, what's she talking about? Because grandma knows some things, right? We know something, we feel things. We're like, what is that? Ancestral wisdom. It's in there. And so that unlearning is also the tapping in and reconnecting as best as we can to that ancestral wisdom. It is being open to hearing something that you've never heard and saying, wait a minute, or the God you referenced. I didn't think about it like that. I think the more of us that are willing and able to confront some of the things that we have all been taught and learned and go, ah, that doesn't feel good to me. Why is that? The closer we get to releasing those vestiges of slavery. And so for parents, healing ourselves is key. Working on our healing is a part of the process. We can do that we have to do that alongside our kids. You know what I mean? We have to do that because that is what also is supportive for them. When I think about community, because we're African people, we are community. Yes, the village. That's what we say. The village. But the community, the village, we have to collectively heal. And we do that together. We do that together. And so I think there are definitely, I mean, I could name organizations in community right now that understand this and are working with young people and are available to be supportive to young people. Right? One of them, programs for girls and programs for young boys that parents should tap into. I think the biggest support is making sure that there is community around you and your child that align with those values that you would like to have your children be raised. I mean, we all know, I know Miss Mary down the street would take whoever's baby if mom was struggling and right and keep their baby from going into the system, right? Miss Mary gonna take the baby and take care of them because they're not going in that system, right? We have to move in the direction of that. It's hard because we are in a technological age. Social media has a huge impact, right, on how we view ourselves, what we look like, what we think we look like. I agree. I was taken aback, not that a couple years ago, my nephew is now 20, but leaving high school, I asked him about where he was applying for school. And he named this list that he and his white counselor had come up with that he applied to. There was one HBCU. And I was like, why not more HBCUs? And his response was, because that's not important. That's not, the world's not all black. Like, I was floored. Please know that freshman year, he attended the University of Maryland Eastern Shore. Because I like, wait a minute, let's get it together. Because we need to understand who we are. This is not, you can make a choice, but also know why this is important. And so we are combating that understanding of who we are as Black people and how, and having to support you. So there are organizations, I think about Zendaya Family, and I think about Project Numa. I think there are organizations in the city that are really doing grassroots work that are aligned with helping you and your child remember who they are as African beings. I think it absolutely starts.
So I'm gonna ask Tiera a question. The audience, after I ask Tiera a question, I'm gonna ask a follow-up that can be for the whole panel. And then so think about whatever questions you have, because after that, we'll take audience questions. So Tiera, as a public defender, you work specifically with children. And I imagine that there are unique challenges that parents are confronted with when their young people are engaged in the juvenile justice system. So what are some just general things that you would say that parents need to watch out for in navigating the juvenile justice system? And what policies would make the juvenile justice system less harmful to Black children and their families?
Okay. Well, first of all, I think the system works under this notion that Black parents can't control their kids. And so if you start from there, it affects everything, right? So first of all, there's parents who are begging for help from these systems, DJS and DSS, with help and support for their kids, right? And so the criminal justice system, although they do offer that support, it's not until the kid is actually in the delinquency system. And so when you have that, you have a kid that's already into the world where people are offering these services, they've already been deemed delinquent, and the help that the parent was asking for before, they may get now, but it's going to be under a different set of conditions, right? There's going to be a lot of intervention with other parties. There's going to be a lack of I would say respect for parents in this system, because it's going to be what this other individual deems is appropriate for your kid. A lot of times in court, I'm advocating and educating the judges about a child because this is the first time that they've had a social history investigation where someone has dug into information about their parents or their past, or, you know, they're trying to find some type of reasoning for maybe why this kid is acting out in a particular way. This is also the first time a lot of kids are getting mental health evaluation. And so that's unfortunate, because I think if we address a lot of the mental health issues before a kid gets involved in delinquency court, then it may subside some of the behaviors, right? You know, a kid has an IEP, how is that going to reflect in a criminal case, right? They're going to be impulsive. They're going to lie about stuff. They're going to make up things that all affect, you know, what goes on in the criminal justice system. I have some points, because if not, I could talk about this all day. There's also a lack of resources. Parents are overextended, right? When your kid is removed from your household, you may be missing a babysitter. You may be missing someone who provides care for other siblings, which adds additional stress to parents. And also, if a child is placed on probation and they're out in the community, you're the one who's responsible for getting them to appointments, getting them to different things that they have to do with their probation officer. They may have therapy. You know, it's an additional set of stress when you've already been trying to do your best as a parent. And now you have the court who knows nothing about your kid unless an attorney like me advocates for things that are going on in your kid's life, deeming that these things are appropriate for them. I also think that there's a parental distrust in the system. And so parents don't trust the people who are in the system. Parents question me all the time about what I'm doing, why I'm doing this. I just had a parent text me earlier, like, well, I reached out to the director of this person, or I reached out to the state attorney. I'm like, why would you do that? You know, I've already done that. Those are things that you don't need to do, but they want to do what's best for their kids, or what they think is what's best. So if you don't trust the attorney, you really don't trust the judges, and you don't trust the state attorney, you don't trust the police, then how is the system going to be effective? Because you already think that the system is not to help anybody. As far as the policies, Dayvon, they need to involve people who are actually involved in the process on a daily basis when they're making legislative decisions. Because a lot of the time the judge is like, this doesn't make any sense. And I'm like, well, I know it doesn't make any sense. This is what I'm arguing for. And they're like, you know, the legislation is like, well, this is what we think is appropriate. We also don't need to make legislation based on trends. So just because you have a lot of young people committing carjacking doesn't mean we need to lower the age to 10 or 12. I think the policies that are in place, you need to play those out and see if they work. And if they don't work, then address it. But don't just do it based on a trend, because we're always going to be chasing a trend. And then also educating people who are in positions of power about Black culture and Black cultural perspective. I shouldn't have to explain to a judge why this kid has a gun. Those are things that you should be thinking about when you're making your decisions, when you're making decisions that affect Black and brown kids in the city or in the county, right? So I do a lot of that. I think that that's something that should be mandated for judges to do. And of course, more funding for nonprofit organizations that provide services to youth before they're involved in the delinquency system. I always believe in that. That's where the funding should go, because if parents have more resources and more things for kids to do and be involved in, then I think that would deter them from seeing me.
Let me ask you a follow-up, Tiera, because I think it's one thing that I want to drill down on. I think it's important for the general public to have a sense of. You mentioned one of the things that you would like is for judges to be more educated about the kind of cultural, kind of social things that happen amongst Black folks. One of the things you mentioned was why a kid would have a gun. And this is something that, again, we see on the news a lot, where people are talking about kids with guns. And the idea is if they have a gun, that means they're bad. That means that they're going to hurt somebody, right? And I've even, when I've testified in Annapolis, pushing back against sense enhancements, one of the things that I'll get is, why would we want to encourage young people to have guns as opposed to, and what I had to say to them is, if you live in a community where you feel like there's violence, it's a rational choice. That don't mean we have to condone it, right? So if you could say about how that dynamic plays out as a public defender, like if you, and maybe you even have examples where you have a young person that you, given your understanding of that child, that family, you understand they're not a bad kid. But in terms of the circumstances, the system treats them that way.
Right. I think it's extremely difficult, and it makes my job extremely difficult to try to make sense of things that don't necessarily make sense. Right? It doesn't make sense to anybody for a young person to have a gun. It just doesn't. But if you understand that young person's background, you understand where they're growing up, you understand where they live, you may understand some of this kid has been bullied, this kid has been jumped on at school, they're not being protected at school, they're not being protected at home, they're not being protected in their own community, there's community guns. It's so many things that play into why kids are carrying guns. And no one thinks it's okay, but I need you to take a couple of minutes to listen to why this particular kid had a gun. Don't just think it's for a negative reason or he wants to hurt somebody, because in most of my cases, that's not the case. Most of the cases are cases where kids have a gun, but haven't used them, right? Don't even know how to use them. It's loaded, I didn't know, because you don't know how to use it because you shouldn't have one, right? So I think that education is important, because I've been at the bench a lot of times and I say, Your Honor, he had a gun. Let me talk about, why did he have a gun? And I was like, well, I'm not gonna say about that, but it can get quite contentious at the bench when you're advocating for young Black people, because they just don't understand. And even when you think they're going to understand, if I say it's a judge of color, they come from a different than a lot of our kids, so they don't understand. We have a judge who's like, well, back in my day, I did this. I said, well, it's different now. It really is. And so I think I've gained a lot of respect, but you have to be able and be willing to advocate a kid in that way where it's no F's given. Let's say it like that, right? I don't care, a judge can try to shut me up. They can do whatever they want to do, but I'm going to keep talking because I'm going to get all my points out, especially about kids when it's important and it's about their decision, their future.
You want to say something, man?
So prior to us starting, Tiera and I were just chatting about how so many of the young people that she may see are co-committed to the child welfare system, and that they are in foster care for many reasons. So as you were talking, what comes to mind is how kids, why does he have a gun? Kids don't necessarily, a lot of kids don't have access to safety ever. And so I was over ear hustling some young people that were walking down the street in the county. I was walking and I just heard them talking, and whatever happened, the scenario that they had just left, they looked like they were teenagers, maybe no more than 16. And they were talking about how they made the choice to exit whatever the situation was, because his words was like, it was about to pop off, and you know how it is, and he made like a gun sound. And immediately my brain was like, the reason why they had the ability to make a choice like that is because they have had access to safety their whole life. These two children that grew up in this neighborhood with these trees and these houses and these lawns. And so when you grow up, both of your houses on either side of you is abandoned and falling down, you don't feel safe, whether or not you've ever actually had an incident of not being safe. You don't feel safe. You don't feel safe. You drive past the neighborhood and say, I don't walk down that street. That's a dog. Imagine living in it, and that's the only thing you know. And so, sure, you have this very immature brain making a decision, right? I just know that this is how the people around my way, this is how they handle problems, and I had a problem with this boy or whoever, and so I knew that Mr. So-and-so had a gun, wherever he keep that, and that's a gun. And so you're talking about, so when you think about a kid that is before a judge, these are all the things that they don't know. Many people don't realize that I'm very familiar with the foster care system. I've worked with DSS, I've worked in private foster care. Many people don't realize that child welfare policy in America, the policy that gives us the structure of foster care today is from 1932. It hasn't changed. The structure of give the states the money to make sure that the check child protective services, and then we give, they've had some updates that are like, now we're going to pay for this, and now we want youth and congregate care, which means out of group homes. We want them in homes because that's safer and healthier, except there's no homes for these babies. So when we think about policy and these judges who, in my day, right, that's how they rule. We're still operating off of something that was created in 1932. Literally, it hasn't changed. And so child welfare system is a family surveillance system. It's not actually child welfare, right? As you think about that, that sounds good and noble and let me help the babies, when for us, it's always historically been, let me save your baby from you, who I'm gonna say is neglectful because the way you parent don't look like how white people parent, when really it's the issue of systemic poverty and need, right? That's what it is. And so when I think about policy, that's what came up for me as you were talking, and how we have to have that lens on what is happening. And we, even amongst us who also say that we talk about our babies, because they are my babies, right? Babies, like our babies, we talk about them like this child is terrible and negative. We have to check that and understand what their perspective is. You may not have grown up, with these houses and looking at blight all day long and every day. I think we have to keep that.
So quickly, before we go to the audience for Sadiq and Cleo, in the context of this conversation, you'll have, and there are parents who will say, I don't know what to do with my kid. I'd rather them go to jail. I'd rather them be subject to the system, right? And that's some of what I heard, like in doing some of the work that I've been doing in fighting back against some of the pullback on some of the progress on juvenile justice. I mean, there are parents that say, I'd rather them be in jail. What would you say? How would you talk to that person in terms of, what it means, the impact that has, and the kinds of alternatives that how you would explain to them the alternatives that would be better for them?
Yeah, no, I appreciate that. Again, I think it goes back to the beginning of the conversation. Shout out to my brother Demi Lade in the building, my fellow brother in the Rites of Passage movement. There's no system or program that's gonna come and save us or fix us. We gotta, again, get out of this mindset that there's a special program, et cetera, that's sufficient enough to undo, outside of our own programming, that's sufficient enough to undo what was done to us. So my thing that I would recommend, or the process I would recommend, is, again, back to this idea that, again, we got to organize as parents, and we have to lean on each other. There was a book that was written, again, right here, one of Baltimore's hidden gems, Dr. Ray Wimbush, wrote a book called The Warrior Method. The Warrior Method is an entire framework for socializing and raising Black boys in America. But one of the key things that Dr. Wimbush talks about in the book, right, is a process to start what he calls young warriors councils. Young warriors councils. And essentially, I'm gonna break it down, right? Like in language that we can understand. Young warriors councils are essentially Black History Sunday school that parents in anywhere across the country, neighborhood by neighborhood, block by block, groups of 4, 5, 6 mothers, fathers, families can get together right at the first outset of saying, you know what, my little homie is wild, but I need a family and community approach. Let's organize young warriors councils, where, again, it might not be the daddy in the household, but somebody got an uncle, somebody got a big cousin,
Somebody got a pop. Let's organize, right? We don't need anybody's permission. Everything doesn't need to be attached to a grant, right? Go, right? And you rotate house by house. Kids was gonna eat anyway. Every Sunday you have a meeting that emphasizes the development and developing Black self-esteem in young people. That could happen tomorrow. That could happen tomorrow, but we have to get organized and again, stop thinking that it's DSS's system or it's DJS's job to come and do this work when we have the wherewithal via some of this ancient technology to organize. So that's the first thing I would say. I would say organize. There are frameworks, there are systems. But again, if you just like don't know where to start, get a group of boys together, get a couple men, right? Meet every other week and bring a single Black history hero or shero and dig into that. Have some conversation about how we have been great and will continue to be great. You have some pizza, you break into the following week. It can be that simple. Then you just start layering in. The only other thing I would say is we have to support in terms of the system of education, right? We got to jump in the game in a variety of ways. So in terms of parents, a lot of times those systems are not inviting, especially to men. We know the educational system. Schools flat out aren't designed to be welcoming to men. But what I would say is that, again, in this co-op model, parents also need to organize and get in the game in terms of these school boards and in terms of the culture of these schools. Because again, if I'm sending my kid to the school ain't safe, I gotta do something about it. But too often times we outsource our power and control to these folks that could care less about it. That's my school. That's my school in the neighborhood. But we don't think of it. We think about, oh, that's their school. That's Baltimore City School. That's your school. Organize a group of 3, 4, 5 parents. Go up there and demand X, Y, and Z that you want to see, and it will happen.
So I mentioned that there are parents, in the legislative work I was doing, there are parents who have been used as examples to say, well, put them in jail, put them in the system, that's better than anything else. So what would you say to a parent for whom that's their posture?
Well, the first thing I want to recommend to everyone, before I say what I will do and have done in those situations, is that we have to take advantage of the word that's in the title, intentional. We have to, in this room and those who are listening, make a conscious effort to intentionally value Black people as a norm, as a way of walking around the planet, as a way of greeting each other, as a way of just engaging one another. I say that because I've had some conversation there with your question about it. I'm honestly just hoping that people are willing to do what I'm willing to do. But before I mention it, people always say it's so exhausting. I ain't got time. I got other things to do. And that's why I started off before I got into it with Black people. Because most of us, when we really want something and we're inspired, we can get it from our sleep and get busy. No matter how tired, it is. It's something going, even a song that's going, hey, you could be, you could be in a death or whatever, but then you jumping up with that's my jam. We need to start making Black people our jam. And Black problem solving our jam. And get enthused and jumping about the next opportunity. First. And that's how I roll. And before I get right to the question, I'm going to give an example of what I'm seeing. And I never get too tired for this, but I do get sleep and I do eat right. That's very important. I'm almost 7 years old and I know I look younger. And that's one of the reasons why I take care of myself. That's another guy. That's my jam. They say, care for myself so I won't be too exhausted to do this Black transformation work. Because it is exhausting. But I need to get my rest. Anyway, I was down near St. Paul where the bus voice used to be, 31st, I think it is. And I typically wear a shirt that says I'm Black people. And that shirt is wear all the time. I didn't wear it today. Some little change. Anyway, I was walking down St. Paul, and this sister, she might have been 30, but she was homeless. She was trim. And she was sitting on one of those benches in that pretty street. And she looked at me. I was walking, nutrition, and energy. And she said to me, and I've heard this a million times, where she said, "Aren't you afraid of offending white people?" That was what she was occupied. I've seen nothing like this before. It was just mine. You see this? Okay. I'm getting ready to go get me some oatmeal. But she said, in the midst of her transit, she said, "Aren't you afraid of offending white people?" And part of my strategy is to never judge. It's never re-traumatize the trauma with my behavior. At all times. That's the notice why you get some sleep. Even when I'm tired, I'm ready to go to blank off. I'm tired, I got fatigue, so I try to make sure I'm not in that state. And I said, I'm trying to go get some oatmeal. I'm not worried about white folks. I'm trying to, And she said, "Oh," and she just could not. I said to her, and I was very calm. And first of all, I said, "Are you hungry?" I said, "I'm gonna get some oatmeal. It's a little something, maybe you want something." And sometimes, we gotta get over it, when you are cooking, it's like, what the fuck? I mean, what are you trying to do? I'm trying to get oatmeal. You know what I'm saying? It ain't that deep. You wanted to come get some with me? And she did. Yeah, we got our oatmeal. She got something she didn't eat. But she put sugar in it. We went back outside and sat down and talked. Now, my point before I get into the whole story was my intentionality. That I was going to engage her. I was going to talk with her. And that's what I do. Dayvon, when somebody is going to ask you something that I find, I'm going to find out what their perspective is and find out why they have their perspective and talk to them about how, if it's appropriate, because I'm going to go with the flow, I don't just make any demands. Listen first, but I have an agenda. I want to get back to it. My agenda is to be helpful to her. My agenda is to be an educator to her and get her to make a decision that affirms her as a Black person, but also that takes her as a human being and considers her point of view, but also points out respectfully what she needs to unlearn and why she has to unlearn. So I'm going to end this by saying this is why you got to succeed and rest and stuff and be intentional, because you can't get past that effectively without a conversation. I mean, you can give them some Band-Aids and nice key things, but if you want them to have a transformative consideration, you have to be able to engage them and make them feel. But caring about can be neutral. Black perspective. I can, because we're Black, I'm Black, we be Black. And we got to deal with that's particular to us. And then I will say, like you said in previous, like, what about white folks? Because we're upset with that here. I'm kind of we really worried about them. And I've asked people who work, I said, why you work? I say, why you so goddamn? I can't say that. That's not way. Why do you care so much about what's going on with them? Why don't you care about being Black and Black people? And it's not a talk. I'll close by saying sometimes they don't even know how to answer that. Don't even know what it's like to care about Black people. That's why those of us who are in this room and in these positions need to teach them.
So what I want to be mindful of, because we're talking about being valuing Black people and valuing Black life, I'm always mindful that we are, the four of us, presumably, we are blessed to have resource, and some of us don't have resources. So when I think about the parents, right, it's easy when you have resources to say, what you need to do is discover your Africanness. That's easy. And so those of us who have resources, I think it is part of our duty as the village, part of the village, to also acknowledge in the way you did as an example, Sister, are you hungry? Like, we can be the worst judges of those of us who do not have. We see it all the time, right? We look down, that mama need to get it together. Maybe she needs something. Maybe you have it. Maybe you should share it. And so it's important that we embody what we say and not ourselves within this community are not, like, I love this notion, thank you for bringing up what Barbara Winbush said in the book about, and just the easy ways. You see that sister down there who you know had 5 kids and she's doing her best, but you never invite them to dinner and you cook everything. It's simple. Like, it doesn't have to be complicated. And so that's how we build community. It is those small things. It is saying, you know what, if you're hungry, come on. I love me a squeegee kid. You hear me? Love me a squeegee kid. I will fight you if you say something nasty about a squeegee kid. Because every time I see one, that's a baby, that's my baby. It is not my destiny in this lifetime to have my own biological children, but I'm not, because I'm a community mama. They are my babies. I speak to them, they come to my car. If I am smiling at them, I roll my window down. I say, you okay? Are you safe? Please be safe today. Please be careful, because I know everybody's not going to be kind. Like, and I hear us talk with them, the kids. Do you understand that the only reason why, who want to be out here doing this? You think they want to be out here? This is need. This is a reflection of necessity. They trying to eat, they trying to bed, they trying to pass away to sleep. And so we have to shift since we are in the community, in the village, we have to shift how we see each other and just extend ourselves just a little bit if we can.
All right, questions, comments from the audience. And someone actually, wrote one down. So I'm gonna read one of the questions that we got from an audience member. This is for the panel. Anybody can answer this. How and where can parents who are struggling with raising their children receive training and therapy in a way that is non-punitive to the parent for their participation? Thank you for the question. Who wants to take that?
So as a therapist, having had a practice, we all know about the stigma it is to access it, right? It's such an interesting tension between, I'm gonna throw my kid at this system, but I also don't trust it. And so I think that that's a reflection, I'm not judging that, that's a reflection of, I'm not sure what to do, and I have been impacted by this system because I don't know what to do, right? And so there is a mistrust, right? And you're nervous. I think we are growing as a community in our interest in seeking therapy. I think it is getting better for sure. So I think it's really connected to the resources that are available that look like us. The number of people, interestingly enough, when I first started my practice, the first 5 people that I came to my practice called me. They were Black men who called and said, I wanted a Black person, and they were all trying to save their relationships. They were not the women in the relationships. As I saw you, sister, and I was like, we can go to her. We can go to her. And so that said to me, oh, we want to figure it out. Like, we want to figure it out. So I think it's just, there's a lot more, not by far the majority, but there are a lot of us who are available, who offer, I think about Bobby, who has his practice is centered on Black men and boys specifically. So we have resources that look like us. There's a website, Therapy for Black Girls. And so it's a whole website of therapists for that. I think it's also that building community part. I think when you trust somebody, you have a rapport with someone, and you're open enough as a parent to be like, I don't know what to do. When you've opened to someone and shared that, because that's being very vulnerable, right? You have an opening to encourage someone to do that. It's here. I will also put a plug in if you have young people and steer them in the direction of this work also, because there is not a lot of programs at the high school level or middle school level that's promoting young people, boys particularly, to come into mental health or social work or this type of field also. They usher our children to play sports and, that's it, right? Like, there are other options, particularly boys, because this is a very female dominated space. And we need more of that. And so the resources are there. If you have a good rapport with somebody, you encourage them, even help them to seek what they need and make sure they get what it looks like for them. I think that's really.
And she mentioned, she was talking about Bobby Marvin Holmes, who has Son of a Dream. So that's one example. Sadiq is here representing Baltimore Rites of Passage Initiative. That's another example. I'm sure ABSW, Association of Black Social Worker, has trainings. So it'll be important to connect to Association of Black Social Workers. So when they have trainings, it'll be important to connect with them. There's an organization called Baltimore Brothers that I know, has boys, and, they do training and work with parents as well. So those are a few examples, and many of the organizations that are represented here can get you connected, depending on the specific need to organizations that do their work. But to Amanda's point, a lot of those organizations do exist, and it's important to support the work that they do.
It's also the Black Mental Alliance, Andrea Brown, whose specific mission is being a clearinghouse to connect Black folks with local mental health services. I work closely with them.
Any other questions, thoughts? I'm gonna come back in. I'm gonna come back to you. Right back here.
Good evening, everybody.
Good evening.
I thank everyone for having this panel. It's always amazing to remember you have a panel speaking about you positive way. I really appreciate that. My sister was like, come on. Okay. Long way for everything. So I really appreciate you guys for that. My one question is that what programs, I've always been in so many programs throughout the city for the youth, like programs like Be Curious Scholars program, programs other Black women started, YSL leaders, Tiera, all these amazing programs. But many of them, they haven't really been marketed to me as much. I always like try to find the truth, so I always found so many programs. I would get in trouble at school because I wasn't on those programs. I wasn't in school. So all these programs are here. I want to look for them, but I'm not really seeing many of them being marketed to you. Like today, they have Instagram, so that's really nice. But there's people don't even know about it unless they look for themselves. And I'm sure many of you would have been packed. That you didn't find out about this. There's so many other programs in the city. So what efforts are being made to try to get it to people through Instagram, through these social medias, things like that?
I just want to mention that I think I understand what you're saying, because I'm always happy to ask people who have groups, type of Black folks, have groups, discussion, and now, what do you think? Where's the youth leader at? Where's the person that's making sure that youth are represented so they can be, I gotta say it all the time. So there is a real blind spot sometimes when it comes to, even among, diehard, really sincere people, they get together with colleagues, diehard means you're about to, you're older, so they hang out with their peers. And forget about the younger people. So sometimes you have to remind them, and I do that. But when young people come such as yourself, you never disinvite that you come and that you raise the issue to make us remember young people. But those of us who she thinks have resources or has sources need to remember to intentionally ensure that your voices are involved in the room.
Yeah, Brother Shaka, great to see you, my brother. Assalamu alaikum. The other thing that I would add, really quickly, going back to the previous question around, ensuring that those resources are out there for parents. I think also just those that are involved in therapy or on their own mental health journey, we need to continue telling our own stories. And those of us who feel comfortable. I mean, I've had so many conversations with Black men parents lately, recently who have put, and again, work with their kids, not just put them in there as punitive, right? But man, this is not like, this is not punishment. This is something to accentuate your experience as you grow and develop. I've heard so many Black men going for their first son. Like, it's just like part of it, like, man, you know, I had a conversation with my therapist. Like, that was not happening just even 5 years ago. So I think just continuing to just have those matter-of-fact conversations intentionally in front of our young people, it then makes it not a big deal. Like, so I just want to make sure that we do that out there. Let's keep the conversation going amongst adults in the presence of our young people. In terms of the marketing, it's a very astute observation that you made. I've often said it in the nonprofit space. Oftentimes, we don't have, an issue around young people being excited, et cetera. We have a marketing issue, right? Because there's many programs in the city, too many to name, where they get $100,000 to run a program for 50 kids for a year. It's 15 kids in the program. So there are, that is a thing, like that's an ongoing thing. But there are a number of efforts in that regard. And I think some of them are increasing in popularity to Brother Cleo's point around actually paying young people in the programs to act as a street team. So let me bring you in and act as the marketing arm of the program. So like that's an actual solution. But I know for a fact the mayor's office of
Employment development,
Children and Family Success, youth services at MOED and the Youth Works program, there are very specific efforts being undertaken around creating like, you know, a clearinghouse and a website, Baltimore's Promise. You go to their website, there's a whole layout there of a whole listing of a bunch of programs throughout Baltimore that are open and accessible to young people. But we absolutely need to do a better job. And again, any nonprofit folks that are watching this or here in the room, we got to pay young people to be our recruiters. We got to go to where young people are, not expect young people to show up to us. We got to go into the hood again, like my brother Sadiq and others, where the young people are. We got to go and recruit them because they're not just showing up. They're not hopping on a bus to come to your program. They don't know you. They don't know nothing about what your work is. We have to go out of our way to invite young people. And then we got to bend over backwards to ensure that there's a value proposition for them to show back up. Because we think oftentimes that we get them there one time, they don't show up the next time. That's some indication of that young person's commitment, dedication, or intelligence. When in reality, they have been traumatized, as the word has been said already, multiple times, a bunch of failing systems, a bunch of adults who have broken promises and not followed through. You're going to have to ask and show up multiple times before young people show up to your thing with any consistency. And I think we got to have a longer range view. We got to have more patience as we recruit and work with our young people who, again, have been scarred by a bunch of these systems and programs. Excellent question.
yeah. I'm gonna go. Yeah, go ahead. Yeah.
Are regarding the programs that are offered, are there any that are not cost prohibitive? Because some people may not be able to access certain things because of the therapy, because of costs.
Baltimore's lucky in that there are a lot of mental health leaders who understand that and who charge little or nothing for what they do. And I know at the Black Mens Xchange, I get grants, so the community doesn't pay anything for what we deliver. So there are maybe the programs that were mentioned, they have a way to get you in there because they want you in there. So though there's a cost prohibitive angle in some cases, in many cases, they're not. And I mean, to find out the difference between the two, along with the programs that were mentioned, the purpose for the Black Mental Health Alliance is to be a clearinghouse to help find places that are not cost prohibitive. And also, if you're total healthcare, the total healthcare is a program in the state that has insurance programs where people get free insurance or low-cost insurance so they can access these programs in case they cost them. So there are options. But I would still go back to that we have to all be involved in actively creating the space for people to figure out whether they value Black people or not. Because if you don't value Black people, and some of us unconscious, if you don't really know where you are on the spectrum of how much you can't deal with Black people, then you become unconscious part of it. I mean, like the sister mentioned much earlier about we need more nonprofit organizations, but we need Black people like that in those nonprofit organizations. Because some people are in a job to ambitiously accomplish white middle class success and to get a Mercedes and a good weed. And that is their agenda. Not because they value Black people. And as I said before, just for you, those of you who maybe find yourself on the spectrum, there's a difference between fighting against racism because you humanize Black people and fighting against racism because that's a barrier to white people. Did that make sense? Because a lot of us who heard you gotta be twice as good as a white man, look, I'm gonna look at being twice as good as I get to be in their face. And that's a dichotomy that is like a solid conversation. Because I don't know, I've been working around nonprofits for a long time, and it can be very difficult finding skilled people who have Black skill. They might know Freud and Jung, and they might know what the DSM-3. Yes, like, ain't no such thing, by the way. Anyway, the point is that, but they know the BS part. But anyway, what I'm trying to make is that we have to get back to coming out of the anti-Black trauma trainings and intentionally making sure that we are part of the solution and that we're an asset to Black people where we sit, where we live, and where we breathe. Because wherever we go to get services, nonprofit, whatever, there's work on that to do, including at HBCUs. There needs to be, to you professors listening, a course on Black quality care assurance, where we make sure that the nonprofit has a measuring device or template. Are you helping Black people? Do you have the capacity in this nonprofit to be a benefit to Black people, or are you just trying to get your weed done? I keep asking the reason y'all get mad at me. Well, my point, I'm trying to make a point. Am I making my point? Right. And priority, not just accountability, but priority. Because we need to make sure that our children are in school, not just to get rich, or only, but to build their toolbox to be an asset to Black people. And they agree, okay, now I'm not the asset to Black people. I'm asset to be an asset to Black people. It can't be a generic, I'm just gonna be a dentist so I can live up in the hills and look down at Black people. That might make you laugh a little bit, but I'm hard to take serious in terms of our worldview, in terms of our intentionality and why we're doing what we're doing. Because most people are doing what they're doing to help their people. I mean, at the next meeting, I tell you what happened with this young lady that I took to breakfast when I asked her, okay, I'll just tell you real quick. It's short, I promise. We were having it in front of a Chinese restaurant. And I said, look to the sister. So look in that restaurant. And then there were Asians. And I'm not mad. I'm not mad. The Asians take care of Asians. I said, now, would you imagine you going in there and asking people, don't you about white people? Are y'all Asian? Chinese food? And she looked at me, that was crazy, because she was in trauma training. So I was going to take her out. With these questions, these triggering questions, because our whole conversation started off because she could not handle that I had a straight up t-shirt that said, value Black people. I wanted to see what people look like who value themselves, why that didn't bother her, or she had no questions for them. You understand what I'm saying? No matter what you do, you got to deal with these baseline issues.
I just wanted to double back to something, because earlier, I think, Sadiq, you said, you talked about decolonizing parenting. And so, there's a core group of folks who are therapists who are also decolonizing therapy. Because what that has looked like for us. What works for us is not the let me lay on your couch and talk to you and you write and take some notes about what's wrong with me and diagnose me with the thing, right? Like that's not what we do. There are, again, we have ancestral wisdom. We have things that we know works for us to heal. And there are definitely therapists out here who we are doing our best to break down those things and say, you know what, the conversation that I would have with this young person playing basketball was therapeutic for him, and it was where he was and where he wanted to be, and not in my office, in my space. Or the woman who needed to lose weight and her self-esteem was in the toilet. And I said, sis, what we gonna do is we gonna meet at Drew Hill Park and we gonna walk around this reservoir and talk. That's what we gonna do. Because that's what you need. That's where you are, and I'm gonna be right there with you. And so I wanted to make that point too, because when we say that people have what do we do with parents who need mental health treatment? Yes, there are things that people have endured, and there are absolute clinical diagnoses that people are struggling with, and that they need help. But a whole lot of us are struggling with the trauma of being here in America and being in this system. And that there is nothing in the DSM-5. I'm fine. Well, I'm fine. There's nothing in the DSM-5 or the BSM. There's nothing in those books that talk about this. There's nothing there. And so I wanted to make that point because what made me think of that was when you said we have to tell our story. Because how healing is it for us to finally tell a story of something that occurred to us that we have held on for 15, 20, 30 years and never realized that it is impacting how I treat my son. Because my father molested me, I am angry. You don't know why I'm angry, but when I look at you and your father, I hate both of y'all. And it's really just this that I've never told her so. And so those are the things that we have to unpack, and it doesn't always look like the Eurocentric way of what therapy looks like. So I wanted to say that. I wanted to also thank the young man in the back for bringing up your question. I do think it's a good question, and now I'm saying this out loud for accountability, because having run nonprofits, I ran homeless shelters here for a number of years. What I know is that a lot of people who work in community with young people or whatever the cause is, they are there because they love the young person or they love the cause and they're not there because they got a marketing degree or they know how to do that, but they're doing beautiful work. And so those organizations or those of us who know how to do that part, we need to be saying, hey, let me fortify you because I know how to do this part. So I appreciate that feedback because there are people doing it well. We got to share that knowledge to folks who are just like, I'm just trying to help these kids because I love them, right? And I think that's really important. So thank you for bringing that up.
We got time for one more question.
Well, I came here to learn. And I work with young people in various aspects, as well as parents. And we talked about resources, but we didn't talk about access. When you use the word, you said our parents are overextended. They're doing all the things, trying to make it work and happen. And so, as a former single mom, I had that life experience. As a mom who stayed home and took care of kids and homeschooled her kids, I had that experience. I now work in our education system, and I help outside of it. So the question I have is, you said we have resources and sources. I heard you when you got that. The problem, one of the challenges, is actual access to resources. When our parents are overextended, and TikTok and Instagram are now the new babysitters when it used to be TV, changing the paradigm of parents. Because just I think 3 years ago, when I mom, daughter was in kindergarten, and she told me, you raised. She said it. I'm sending you to school so you can raise. And I was able to, over time, have a conversation so she could understand. She had to unlearn so she could relearn. But a lot of our parents, especially our younger parents, who didn't grow up with their ancestral wisdom. They didn't have grandparents, grandmothers, grandfathers to impart and instill this knowledge. The challenge is, how now are we going to meet them, reach them, and bridge that gap between access and resource forces?
I think you just said the answer, to be honest, because what you said you did for her, with her, is part of the answer. So it goes back to that community, because you're right. People are overextended, people are overwhelmed, and it really does take the community of us who, if you understand that the kindness goes far. It's just a lot, right? It's everybody, so it feels daunting and overwhelming. I feel like the best resource is each other, to be honest. And so the more of that we can do, and I appreciate the work of any educator that's in a school all day long with all the young people at any age, because you do see it all. It's like foster care. You see it all in foster care. Like we see it all. Sure, she sees it all, right? In these spaces that we have the young people in. I do think that's one of the best resources, but we have to be willing, just like I said earlier, to have that relatable conversation. Like, I'm a woman just like you. Like, you can say that, right? It's not shuffling them off and judging her and saying, why are you letting this tablet, this iPad, raise your baby? Again, it's not new, because nothing is new under the sun, right? So it just moved from TV to a device, right? And so I think we have to do just that, pull back to what we know, those of us who do know. And you said a great point too. We don't have grandmas like we used to have. My grandmother was in my house my whole life. We don't have intergenerational living in the same way also. We get some of that. And so those of us who have it absolutely have to give it and be willing to do that.
At the risk of getting on people's nerves, I just want to say that some of, and I can't paraphrase you exactly, just like you framed it in terms of this, people are overextended. Even when we're overextended, we have to prioritize. And I'm recommending that we prioritize healing and caring about Black people and creating space to purge and unlearn internalized white supremacy mythology and anti-Blackness and make that just a normal part of what we do. Also, some of our exhaustion is based on the impact of repression. And what I mean by repression, I mentioned earlier about the kids who saw Donovan Jackson get killed and who saw these different things, and there's no conversation. The lack, some people have to pee and you don't get to, you have, it makes this disorienting. And it's exhausting when you can't find options. Particularly for women in this society, they go to the court. My point is that repression is real for us, because along with the recommendation that we work as hard as a white man, there's no answers or no insight about why that even exists, which creates a whole bunch of anxiety and time wasted on what the F, I can't say what the F. And that's exhausting too, because they don't know what the F. And they'll go on and on, and day after day, year after year, would go to school, get a good job, assimilate with a nice car, which is crazy making and exhausting. So we have to psychically prepare ourselves not to ever get too exhausted, which takes focus, role modeling, education, affirmation, supporting community, and much of what people sit up here particularly him in terms of building community, building intentional spaces for reparation and nurturance of each other. We have to deflect some of that exhaustion with answers to questions that we have not allowed our children to even ask, and that we haven't even asked them how they feel and checked in with them. They can feel free enough to say what they really feel, which creates exhaustion. You understand what I'm saying? So I reiterate the importance of prioritizing Black in learning and relearning, but no matter how tired you are, they can be what you just part of what you do.
Very quickly, I know we're butting up against time. Number one, again, thank you, as has already been said, thank you for the work that you've done and are doing. I'll just go back, African proverb, many hands make light work. None of us have all of what we need, but all of us got all of what we need. And, I just say that in a context, like, if there is one parent she wants better or he wants better, go and find just one more to help shoulder both the physical, psychic, and emotional toll and load of the work. Where there is one, there can be two. And when we know that there's two of the same mind, it's a whole other thing that happens. Spirituality. That's on the drops in. But don't gotta be, we don't need 50 all the time to show up. We just need one who got the vision. They just gotta find one more. Let's get busy. Organize tiny meetups that can grow. They just take one person with a vision. They just gotta find one more, and boom, you off to the races. That's what I would say. It is overwhelming, but many hands make light work.
So a couple of things in closing. First, in some ways, an extension to the response to the question that was raised. There's a lot going on in our community, a lot of work that's happening. One of the things that LBS does is that we advocate for more resources to many of those grassroots organizations so that they can do the work that many of us want done. And I would argue that if many of the organizations that are represented here, many of the organizations in our network span the gamut in terms of the type of interventions, right? And so one of the things that I think is really important is for all of us to be ambassadors for those that are engaged in that work, right? Because, we know a lot of people that are doing things that would be helpful to the community, and to this marketing point, people don't know. And so I think that's particularly important. I think the other piece too, there's a narrative piece to it as well, right? If we think about the way that the narratives and, mainstream media and social media would have us believe that Black people aren't doing anything, right? And there's a way that it impacts our morale in a way that we can buy into it, right? When really the reality is in some ways the opposite of what the narrative is on mainstream media. There's actually lots of people doing lots of stuff, and things would be a lot worse if folks weren't doing the things that folks are doing, right? So I think it's really important that, we are ambassadors for the work, and we, try to encourage people to learn about the stuff that folks are doing. The last thing I want to say is, as I mentioned at the top, one of the things that we work on in terms of policy is making sure that the primary response to the issues that our young people are dealing with is not the juvenile justice system. And one of the things that we're going to be advocating for is stopping the automatic charging of youth as adults, right? So that's something that we're going to be talking about in the upcoming Maryland General Assembly. And just to give you a sense of why that's important, the juvenile system, while we don't want our young people in the system at all, right? We would rather them be in the juvenile system than the adult system. And there are 33 charges that if a young person is charged with any of those charges, they're automatically in the adult system. And then what happens is that a attorney has to petition to get them waived down to the juvenile system, where they should have been the entire time. And there are stories where young people who were put in the adult system, in essence, were harmed. And in essence, the kind of criminogenic elements was inbred in them by being in the adult system, exacerbating the problem, right? And so one of the things that we're going to be advocating for is that all young people start in the juvenile system. And in fact, 66% of all young people charged as adults get waived down anyway, right? So for us, all young people should start in the juvenile system, right? Where they'll have more access to some of the resources that we talked about today, as opposed to, again, being subject to the adult system where there are little to no resources provided for the young people there. So I would urge people to stay connected to Leaders of a Beautiful Struggle. That's something that we're going to push in the 2025 Maryland General Assembly. Again, with the hope that what we've talked about will be the primary interventions, and that parents, one of the things that happened in this past Maryland General Assembly is that the challenges that parents have been faced with was weaponized against us trying to keep young people out of the system, right? So the example I gave, or the scenario I gave of a parent that says the young person is better off in the system, that's something that we're actively fighting, right? So that's why it's even more important that, again, some of these alternatives, right, that don't require people to go in the system are things that are made front and center, so that those narratives aren't used as a way to further criminalize young people, as the response to this society will want when it deals with Black youth. So just wanted to put that on folks' radar. Again, want to thank we give our panelists a round of applause. I want to thank everybody again for coming out. If you haven't signed up to be a sustainer or signed up to be on our email list to support the work we do, please, make sure you do that on the way out, and safe travels. Thank you.